Kraft has spoken, and he's pretty peeved. That's actually the headline in Peter King's MMQB, which was posted in the wee hours of the morning. He did what he describes, Peter, as a 50-minute phone conversation on Saturday with Robert Kraft. Kraft speaking from his home outside of Boston. Peter describes him as sounding alternately defiant and angry, convinced the league does not have a smoking gun that would prove anyone connected with the organization deflated a bag of footballs to make them more to Brady's liking in the AFC title game 4 months ago. He is convinced the Wells report distorted the science to fit a conclusion that doesn't work. He thinks the league has nothing but what he called, quote, ambiguous circumstantial evidence. Let me read you some quotes, the ones I just set aside a few that I think are the most significant. On Tom Brady, does he believe Brady is innocent? And asked if Brady had told him he was innocent. Kraft said, quote, yes, because we had the discussion. If you did it, let's just deal with it and take our hit and move on. I've known Tommy 16 years, almost half his life. He's a man, and he's always been honest with me, and I trust him. I believe what he told me. He has never lied to me, and I have found no hard or conclusive evidence to the contrary. So when I read, I was not here, of course, on Friday. My thanks again to Ryan. It's he came up big for me to come, and I needed him, and I appreciate it. But I was on a plane, and I read every word of that thing. So going back to that, we can get you quickly, the report they put out, which all day during that show we said they made some good points, but they kind of, blew it with the whole deflator and weight loss thing. That wound up getting a lot of the attention. Yeah. It did strike me, as most people, as just sounding ridiculous. Right. That said, it did not, for me, diminish the legitimate questions that it raised. Well, it shouldn't. I understand. It took away from it, but when you get down to an appeal or the people that are going to really make the decisions here, it shouldn't have any effect. Here's the thing. Here was what I basically took away from it. If you want to make an argument that there had been a conclusion reached, or at least a strong suspicion reached, and an investigation was done, believing that they were looking for evidence that this had happened, I thought that report that I read last Thursday did a pretty good job of that. Gave you evidence that it happened. That it did a pretty good job of that. Now, what keeps rolling around in my head, however, is that in some ways that doesn't make sense to me. Because what that would then be showing is evidence that the league decided they wanted to bring down Tom Brady and went about trying to find a way to do it. And I keep coming back to, and I asked Don Yee when we had him on, why on earth would they want to do that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, look, there's a lot of political things that go on behind the scenes that we don't know anything about. At the end of the day, I continue to believe something happened here. And I think a lot of other things that have happened are very difficult to explain away. And nowhere in that report, the context report that they put out last Thursday, does it explain why Jastrzemski and McNally are suspended. While we say Kraft spoke and we see a lot of his quotes, there were also more than a few things that he did not speak about, and that was one of them. And that was one of the big questions out, and we still have zero answer to why those two were suspended. But going back to my original thought, the first reaction I had, and I tweeted this at the time, was Brady better not be lying. Yeah. Because he has now, Robert Kraft, and look, he loves Kraft. Yeah. They have a very good relationship. You hear Kraft saying it right here. We had the discussion. I told him, let's just deal with it and take our hit and move on. And that's exactly what should have happened. Do you pull him in and say, Tom, what went on? Exactly right. Yes. And you tell me, if in that circumstance, because Kraft has gone all in. Yes, he has. You cannot be any more all in behind anybody than he's gone all in behind Brady. So you tell me, if some sort of incontrovertible proof winds up coming out that Brady is lying to him, you tell me. Awful. Bad, right? Just awful. Because Brady will have made it 1,000 times worse for himself. 1,000 times worse. Because as mentioned right there, Kraft, you had the conversation. And if something happened, just say it, and we'll deal with it. Because now they put themselves in a position, whether it's Tom or whether it's the Patriots, and I believe they have by May 21st to decide, if they want to appeal their punishment, that if anything's, we were discussing this Friday, if the punishment is lessened, is that enough for the Patriots? Or are they going whole hog in on getting everything done? If Tom goes down to 2 games, is he happy with that? Is he saying, I accept the 2 games? Because then you're accepting some guilt. And they have done nothing but say, we have done nothing wrong. So anything other than complete vindication, would they accept or would they take it to the courts? Because now you're really starting to balance, okay, is it worth going that far? And the way they're talking right now, the way that organization, especially Kraft, has come out, you have to believe they're coming out guns a-blazing.
Bear in mind, let's take it back to 2007, Spygate, and that whole situation that they went through. Belichick admitted to Kraft he had done it.
Right.
Not only was there evidence, there was the actual video evidence. But I remember the story of Kraft saying that Belichick, the legendary story that goes on that is sort of one that most people know, is that Kraft said to Belichick, how much competitive gain did we get from this? And Belichick said practically none. And Kraft said to him, well, then you're a schmuck.
Yeah.
And that's Kraft. So Kraft... It says to Peter King in this, last time there was no dispute about the facts. The team admittedly said what happened. It was illegal to videotape the opposing sidelines. In the end, we admitted it and took our penance.
Right.
This is very different. In 2007, we did something and acknowledged the fact of what was done. This is an accusation of wrongdoing without proof. So he is all in behind Brady. So whereas Tom Brady might have, let's in fairness to him say, might have been involved in something in letting the air, a little tiny bit of air out of the footballs to gain a tiny competitive advantage, which, let's just say for the sake of argument, it had been proved immediately he did it,
right,
would have, in the minds of many people, been next to nothing.
Next to nothing compared to where we're going now.
Look what this is now. This is Kraft launching a full-out offensive in his defense because you know he has sat face-to-face with Brady, and Brady told him he didn't do it. And if it comes out now, if it is somehow proven to Kraft that Brady did do it, I think that goes a longer way towards just really tarnishing Brady's legacy than anything else.
Without question, because we at first when this happened, we talked about if he was involved in doing this, what would it do to his legacy? This takes it way beyond. Again, just look at some of the others we've talked about for different reasons who have lied about it. It makes it completely worse. And just the way they're going off now about it, and I think the biggest surprise to them was when the report came out and there was a lot of, more probable than not, and it looks like they did more than didn't, was the punishment. How strong? I don't think they expected that. While I don't know if they fully expected the Wells report to vindicate them and say, look, we did nothing wrong, though Robert Kraft a while ago was saying he expected an apology, which Roger Goodell on our show said that wasn't happening at all. I think they were stunned at the punishment. And let me ask you real quick, because we talked about this on Friday. Do you have any problem with Roger Goodell hearing the appeal?
A little bit, yes.
I have none.
Why?
Because what term has been brought up the most about this when you're doing something on the field to the game? And we hear it a lot, the integrity of the game, right?
Yeah.
And what do we attach with every commissioner in any sport? Is one of their main things is the integrity of the game. This is to the integrity of the game. So, as I said Friday, Roger Goodell can't win. And he can't win in a court of public opinion no matter what decision he makes. So if I were him, I would do this too. You know what? I'm the commissioner. It is my job to keep the integrity of the game. This directly flies in the face of the integrity of the game. I'm hearing it. I don't care what anybody else says, and I have zero problem with that.
I'll tell you why I disagree. Because while this, the punishment and the report and everything else have the name of Ted Wells and the name of Troy Vincent on them, at the end of the day, that's Roger Goodell's decision. I have to believe that Troy Vincent didn't just decide on his own, this is what I'm going to rule here. If he did, then that strikes me as that should have been Roger. I support, look, I'm not nearly as down on Goodell as a lot of other people are. I think he has made colossal mistakes, but everyone makes mistakes. I'm not as down on him as many other people are. In this particular case, with something that has gotten this high profile, you put this Wells report together, I think that you should not be afraid of having an independent person look at it and rule whether or not it was sufficient. And I don't think that you could argue at this point that the league office is independent.
But then the league would be admitting that the Wells report wasn't independent. This is to the NFL. You may not think so. Other people may not think so. But the league has said, Ted Wells, do this independent report. Now you want them to come out and say, you know what? Through this appeals, we're going to get an independent report to check the independent report. Now you're admitting that the independent report you did first wasn't really that. You can't do that.
Your highest profile owner, maybe a person who actually is more powerful than Roger Goodell himself, has accused you of that.
Okay.
That's on the table.
Then you know what? You let him handle the business. Integrity of the game, commissioner, handle the business. They did an independent report. Some people don't believe it was an independent report, but to the NFL, go do an independent report. Now it comes back to the commissioner. He's hearing the appeal. It's about the integrity of the game. He can't have an independent report check the independent report. That's ridiculous. That would make the league look ridiculous to do that. Let's remember the fact of the report that Robert Kraft put out with their independent guy who happens to be connected with the Kraft company. So that wasn't maybe the smartest move in the world. Could then complain about the Wells independent report and then have a guy connected with your company. But I couldn't disagree with you more. You can't have an independent report on an independent report. That makes you look ridiculous.
Now, here's your question.
Yeah.
The Wells report is an independent report.
Yes.
But does it feel that way?
But you're missing my point. If the league now says we're going to have an independent report on the independent report, then they look ridiculous for having the independent report in the first place. They said it's an independent report. They believe it is. The Ted Wells, they say, has the integrity from his background to have an independent report. Now you're having an independent report? Investigate the independent report? I mean, come on. This almost can't look silly enough unless you did something like that.
Well, let me ask you a question then. So Roger hears the appeal, and he upholds exactly what's been done.
Okay.
Is that the best way to put an end to this chapter? Is that the most legitimate way to put an end to this chapter? Or does that only keep it going further and further?
That's up to the Patriots.
Well, the Patriots, there's the Patriots, and then there's the court of public opinion. And while I agree with you that Roger in some cases cannot win.
Can't win.
Well, but I think a lot of people like what they did here. I mean, the research we showed last week, we did a poll that shows that they think the league did the right thing.
Right.
And my point is, if they did the right thing, and maybe they did, I mean, I think that now it's gotten to a point where I would support what they've done based upon the fact that the Patriots have made this into this, sort of larger-than-life issue. I think that their initial complaint, they've now taken it and actually made the whole thing a bigger deal than it would have been prior to that. But I guess to me, the way they do things on some level in baseball, I liked, which is to say baseball rules, the Players Association fight it, they go to the independent arbitrator, the independent arbitrator rules one way or another. It happened in the case of Ryan Braun, and it's happened in a couple of other cases. Yeah. And I never viewed those as losses for baseball, much in the same way that if Roger Goodell or the league had initially come down, I know we're going all the way back now, and done when the Ray Rice thing first happened and said, I suspend you for 16 games, and then the Players Association fought it, and then it got knocked down to 8 games. Yep. Would you have seen that as a loss for the league?
No, I wouldn't have either. I agreed with you at the time.
I wouldn't consider this a loss. But the Ted Wells did not do this investigation, in theory, for the league. He did an investigation. Now we need someone to determine whether we think it's legitimate or not, because the Patriots and the most powerful person maybe in the whole league is saying it's totally wrong.
Well, no, you can't, and not only is saying it. That's up to the Patriots then. The league got an independent person, you can, again, disagree with that, to do the report. This is the report, okay? And it found the Patriots guilty. The Patriots don't like it. They appeal. Collectively bargained, the appeal goes to the commissioner.
Right.
And he is saying he's going to hear it for the reasons of integrity of the game, and I have zero issue with that. And if he upholds the appeal, then it's up to the Patriots if they want to keep going with it. You can't just keep having independent report after independent report and say, check up on the independent report. You had an independent report. There it was. That was the findings of the independent report. Now it goes to appeal. If you don't like the appeal, New England, then take it to the next step if you want.
But I think that there's two separate levels to that. Was the independent report done satisfactorily? And the second part of it is, did the punishment fit the crime? So
that's what the appeal's for.
That's what the appeal is for. And that appeal is going back to the same person who made the punishment. Because if you think anyone believes that Troy Vincent did that by himself, without conferring with Roger, I think you would find a very skeptical audience.
I can't help but keep saying it, and I was a former player, and I'm sorry to say this against my former players. Don't let it get bargained in. You let it get bargained in the CBA.
Right, because the owners had the opportunity to put a hammer to the players, and they took it. And it's another example of how it is not always in everyone's best interest, just because the fact that you could beat me up doesn't mean you should, right? If you and I are having a fight, you could beat me up until the point that I can't even get up anymore. But what have you really proved? In this case, that wound up being the worst thing that ever happened to the league, and the owners, and they deserve it. And I guess on some level, that includes Mr. Kraft, and he deserves it, because this is a terrible idea. The fact that this is going back, that this appeal of Roger's decision is going back to Roger, is a terrible idea. It makes everybody look bad. The fans are going to walk away from this totally unsatisfied. Kraft himself is going to walk away from this unsatisfied, and it may wind up in court.
It may.
Which is the last thing in the world I think the league wants.
I don't think anybody wants to be in court.
Well, except that one could argue, and I don't know if I even think this, but I think it's an argument that could be made, that the National Football League, through the NBA playoffs, through the possibility of a triple crown, through the fight, through the baseball season, the hockey playoffs, manages to be the top story everywhere again.
Don't think they want this.
I don't think they want it.
No, I don't think they want this. I would disagree.
I think everything brings more interest.
100%.
Was there or was there not a belief that the Super Bowl rating was influenced in a positive way by Deflategate? I mean, I just saw an interview with Al Michaels this weekend. Where was he being interviewed? I think it was in Bob Raceman's column in the Daily News that Al Michaels was interviewed saying, attributing part of the success. Oh, the reason he was interviewing him is because if the 4-game suspension holds up, then Brady's first game back will not only be against the Colts, but it'll be on Sunday night. It is a Sunday night game. Right. So Michaels was talking about how that will get a huge additional audience based upon the fact that it's his first game back and everything, right? So maybe some attention is all attention is a good thing, especially when it's something like, no one is saying that that Tom Brady killed somebody.
Right.
He may have let air out of the football. So is this such terrible publicity for the league? It really isn't. This isn't domestic violence. This is letting the air out of a football.
Couldn't disagree more. They don't want it. They don't want this publicity. You think they're going to keep it going? Hey, let's stay in the news.
I don't think they're going to keep it going, but by the law of
unintended consequences, that may be fine. That may be fine, but I don't think they're trying to do that.
Can Steve come after the break? Can Steve jump in? I need to go a quick break. It's fine. Well, Stephen A. Smith, Herman Edwards is on his way up here. We'll talk with him. Stephen A. Smith has called in. He wants to comment. Hopefully he can do that in just a moment here on Mike and Mike, so stay with us. Which side of this do you fall on? In my opinion, in order to put this thing away, if you really want to put it away, I would have Herman Edwards rule on it, or someone like that. Okay, Herman is fired up.